In February 1943, a Soviet soldier yanked a frozen flag from a dead SS officer near Demyansk. The skull and crossbones told him everything. These weren't regular soldiers. These were death camp guards with tanks. But here's what your history books leave out. When the Red Army learned exactly who the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf were, they marked them for death. Not defeat. Death. This is how Stalin's armies hunted Hitler's most brutal killers to extinction. Theodor Eicke ran Dachau concentration camp. In 1939, he got a new job. Hitler wanted his camp guards turned into soldiers. Not regular soldiers, special ones. Eicke handpicked 6,500 men. Every single one had guarded a concentration camp. They knew how to kill without thinking. They knew how to follow any order. Now they got tanks. They got artillery. They got a mission. Spread terror. They wore a skull on their helmets. The Totenkopf. Death's head. Other German soldiers saw that skull and stayed away. These men were different. Darker. One Wehrmacht officer wrote in his diary, "The SS men don't take prisoners. They shoot the wounded. Even we fear them." In Poland, September 1939, they showed what they could do. In Waffen, they locked families in barns, then burned them alive. In Piotrków, they lined up 300 civilians against a wall, machine-gunned them all. A survivor named Jan Kowalski hid under bodies for 6 hours. He heard the soldiers laughing. He heard them singing. These weren't acts of war. This was sport. Franz Kneipp served in the division. His diary survived the war. November 1939, he wrote, "Today we cleaned a Polish village. The priest begged on his knees. I shot him in the church. His congregation too. Germany needs this land empty." By 1940, every army in Europe knew the skull insignia. Eicke had created exactly what Hitler wanted. Soldiers who enjoyed killing. Soldiers who never questioned orders. Soldiers who would commit any atrocity. But these death camp guards had only fought civilians and prisoners. They'd never faced a real enemy. Therefore, when Operation Barbarossa began in June 1941, they would finally meet soldiers who could fight back. June 22nd, 1941. 3 million German soldiers poured into the Soviet Union. The Totenkopf division led the killing. They had new orders. The Commissar Order. Kill every Soviet political officer. Kill every Communist Party member. Kill every Jew. Make the population afraid. In Brest, they executed 200 Soviet officials in the town square. Made their families watch. In Minsk, they burned the Jewish quarter. 3,000 people died in one day. They photographed everything. They were proud. Near Lochwitza, September 1941, they captured 200 Soviet soldiers. The prisoners dropped their weapons, raised their hands. The Totenkopf lined them up in a ditch, then opened fire with machine guns. Dmitry Petrov watched from the woods. He was wounded, hiding. They weren't soldiers, he later testified. Soldiers take prisoners. These were executioners. They shot my friends like dogs. Some were still moving. The SS walked through the ditch, shooting heads. The worst came at Baba Yar outside Kiev, September 29th to 30th, 1941. The Totenkopf helped murder 33,771 Jews in 2 days. Men, women, babies. They made them strip naked, stand at the edge of a ravine, then machine gun them into the pit. But the Soviets were watching. Therefore, the NKVD, Stalin's secret police, started keeping lists. Every massacre, every burned village, every murdered prisoner. They wrote down names. They drew the skull insignias. They prepared for revenge. Soviet agent Pavel Sudoplatov infiltrated behind German lines. His reports to Moscow were specific. The Totenkopf Division, identified by Death's Head insignia. Location, Sector 7. Crimes: mass murder of civilians, execution of prisoners. Recommend no quarter when captured. Winter came early in 1941. The temperature dropped to -40. The Totenkopf dug in, confident. They controlled vast territories. They'd killed thousands. They thought they were winning. They were wrong. The Red Army had regrouped. More important, they knew exactly who they were fighting now. Every Soviet soldier heard the stories. The death camp's guards. The baby killers. The ones with skulls on their helmets. Mikhail Volkov was a Soviet lieutenant. His brother was shot at Lokhvitsa. He wrote to his wife, "I've seen their insignia. The skull. When I see it, I don't see soldiers. I see murderers. We will give them exactly what they gave us. Nothing." January 8, 1942. Soviet forces surrounded 100,000 Germans near Demyansk. The Totenkopf division was trapped inside. The Soviets knew exactly where the SS units were positioned. Their artillery had specific orders. Priority targets. Positions marked with Death's Head insignia. Continuous bombardment. No ceasefire for medical evacuation. For 105 days, shells fell on Totenkopf positions every hour. Soviet snipers had bounties for SS insignias. Bring back a Death's Head helmet badge. Get extra vodka rations. Bring back SS collar tabs. Get leave to visit family. The temperature hit -45. German supply planes couldn't land. The Totenkopf ate their horses. Then their dogs. Then leather boots. Men's feet turned black with frostbite. Doctors amputated with hacksaws. No anesthetic. Heinrich Villa served in the division. He survived and wrote, "The Russians knew who we were. Our wounded disappeared. Other units could arrange prisoner exchanges. Not us. If you wore the Death's Head, you died." Ivan Petrov was a Soviet sniper in the pocket. He had 31 confirmed kills, all SS. Each bullet was payback, he wrote. "My village was burned by the SS. My parents died. Every dead Totenkopf man was justice." By May 1942, when the pocket finally broke, the Totenkopf had lost 7,000 men, over half their strength. The survivors looked like skeletons. Their proud black uniforms hung in rags. But the division got reinforcements. Fresh recruits who'd never seen a concentration camp. Therefore, these new men thought they could escape the division's reputation. They thought wrong. The Soviets remembered everything. Red Army units began finding Totenkopf prisoners shot in the back of the head. Not by accident. Deliberately executed. Soviet commanders looked the other way. Some encouraged it. General Vlasov told his men, "The SS are not soldiers. They're war criminals. Treat them accordingly." July 5, 1943. Hitler launched Operation Citadel. The Totenkopf division would spearhead the southern attack. They had 140 tanks, including massive Tigers. They thought they were unstoppable. The Soviets were ready. They knew the attack was coming. More important, they knew exactly where the Totenkopf would strike. Soviet intelligence had been tracking every SS unit for months. Marshal Zhukov gave specific orders. The SS Totenkopf will attack at Prokhorovka. Concentrate all available artillery on grid 237. When they advance, destroy them completely. July 12th, the trap sprung. The Totenkopf tanks rolled forward into the greatest tank battle in history. But this wasn't random combat. Therefore, the Soviets had marked every SS tank as a priority target. Sergeant Mikhail Petrov commanded a T-34 tank. He saw the Death's head painted on a Tiger tank's turret. "That skull made my blood burn," he wrote. "My gunner put 3 shells into it. It burned for hours. We could hear the crew screaming. We didn't help." In 3 days, the Totenkopf lost 70 tanks, half their armor, gone, 4,000 men, dead or wounded. The division's attack collapsed. Soviet artillery captain Yuri Bondarev watched through binoculars. "We could see the SS retreating, abandoning their wounded. We kept firing. No mercy for the merciless." German radio intercepts told the story. One Totenkopf officer transmitted, "Under concentrated attack. They know exactly where we are. Request immediate withdrawal. Response, negative. Hold position." Final transmission, "Position overrun." A captured Totenkopf sergeant told interrogators, "You targeted us specifically. Regular army units beside us took normal fire. We got everything you had. You wanted us dead." The interrogator replied, "We know what you did in the occupied territories. Every village, every mass grave. Yes, we wanted you dead." After Kursk, the Totenkopf never attacked again, only retreated. The hunters had become the hunted, and the Red Army would chase them all the way to Berlin. August 1943. The Totenkopf ran west through Ukraine. The same roads they'd conquered in 1941. The same villages they'd burned. But now, Soviet tanks chased them. Therefore, every mile of retreat was paid in blood. The Red Army found mass graves everywhere. Katyn Forest. 4,000 Polish officers shot in the head. Vinnytsia. 9,000 Ukrainian civilians in burial pits. Each discovery made Soviet soldiers angrier. Captain Viktor Suvorov's unit liberated a village near Kharkov. They found 300 bodies in a well, women and children. Suvorov gathered his men. The SS did this. The ones with the skull badges. "From now on, take no SS prisoners." That's an order. January 1944, Korsun Pocket. Another trap. The Totenkopf was surrounded again, this time with 60,000 other Germans. Soviet loudspeakers broadcast day and night. "Wehrmacht soldiers, you can surrender. SS soldiers, you will die." For 2 weeks, Soviet artillery turned the pocket into mud and blood. When German units tried to break out, the Soviets let regular army troops through, then closed the gap when SS units approached. February 17th, the pocket collapsed. Soviet troops found 800 Totenkopf soldiers who'd surrendered. By morning, all 800 were dead. Shot in the head. Their death's head badges cut from their uniforms as trophies. Hans Müller, a Wehrmacht officer, witnessed the aftermath. The Russians separated SS from regular army. "We were sent to prison camps. The SS were marched into the forest. We heard machine guns. They never came back." The division kept retreating. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia. At each border, they left equipment, tanks out of fuel, artillery without shells, men without hope. By December 1944, only 4,000 Totenkopf soldiers remained, from 20,000. They'd lost 80% of their men. The skull on their helmets was now a death sentence. Soviet troops would spot that insignia and call in artillery strikes just to kill a single SS man. Private Wilhelm Hoffmann wrote his last letter home. "The Russians know our every position. Partisans report our movements. We can't even bury our dead. The death's head means nothing now except our own death coming." December 1944. The last organized Totenkopf units were trapped in Budapest. Stalin ordered the city taken at any cost. He gave special instructions. The SS Totenkopf is in the city. Ensure none escape. For 50 days, Soviet artillery turned Budapest to rubble. They aimed specifically at buildings where SS units sheltered. Soviet loudspeakers broadcast the crimes of the Totenkopf in German. You burned our villages. You shot our prisoners. You murdered our children. Now you will pay. Inside the siege, Totenkopf soldiers starved. They ate rats. They drank water from radiators. Frostbite took fingers and toes. Medical supplies ran out. Men died from infected wounds. Corporal Ernst Wagner kept a diary. The Russians won't accept our surrender. Other units can give up. We can't. They see our insignia and shoot. We're already dead. We just haven't stopped moving yet. February 13, 1945. Budapest fell. Of 1,000 Totenkopf soldiers in the city, fewer than 30 escaped. The rest died fighting or were executed after capture. The survivors fled west toward Austria. They burned their SS papers, tore off their insignias. Some stole Wehrmacht uniforms from dead regular army soldiers. Anything to hide who they were. But Soviet intelligence tracked them. Therefore, partisan networks reported every SS movement. Radio Moscow announced, "The criminals of the Totenkopf division cannot hide. We know their names. We know their faces. Justice will find them." April 1945. The final 500 Totenkopf soldiers made their last stand near Vienna. Soviet forces surrounded them. No escape. The commanding officer, Helmuth Becker, had two choices: surrender to the Soviets and face certain execution, or fight to the death. He chose a third option. On May 8, 1945, Becker led his men west and surrendered to American forces. He knew the Americans would put him in prison. The Soviets would put him in a grave. Even then, it wasn't over. Soviet authorities demanded the Americans hand over all SS prisoners. Some were transferred. Those men disappeared into Soviet camps. Few returned. The 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf started with 40,000 men. Fewer than 1,000 survived Soviet captivity. That's a 97% death rate, the highest of any German division. They thought the skull on their helmets made them frightening. It did. It also marked them for death. Every Soviet soldier could identify that insignia. Every partisan could report their position. Every artillery observer could call in strikes on their positions. Theodor Eicke, who created the division, died in 1943 when Soviet fighters shot down his plane. They found his body with the Death's Head insignia. They left it to rot. Hermann Priess, a division commander, was captured by Americans. Tried for war crimes. Sentenced to 20 years. Released after 5th Soviet authorities protested. They wanted him hanged. The survivors who made it home never talked about their service. They hid their tattoos, burned their photos, changed their names. They knew that somewhere, Soviet intelligence kept lists. Even decades later, they feared a knock on the door. In 1965, 20 years after the war, former Totenkopf soldier Johann Neumann was found dead in Argentina. Shot in the head. Execution style. Local police found Soviet currency in the killer's abandoned car. The case was never solved. The Death's Head insignia they wore so proudly became their curse. It marked them as Hitler's most fanatical soldiers. It also marked them for systematic annihilation by an enemy that never forgot and never forgave. The Soviets had turned the hunters into the hunted. They used the Totenkopf's own methods against them. Brutality, no mercy, complete destruction. The death camp guards who became soldiers discovered what happens when your enemy decides you don't deserve to survive. The skull and crossbones was supposed to terrify their enemies. In the end, it was a prophecy. Not for their victims, for themselves. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more fascinating World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.